All right, so today we're going deep, really deep. We're looking at this YouTube channel, and get this, they're saying what's happening in Gaza right now lines up with, like, biblical prophecy. Wild, right?
Yeah, it's pretty out there.
But hold on, before anyone jumps to conclusions, we're not here for a theological debate.
Right.
We're here to, like, break down how they're even making this connection. What parts of the Bible are they using, and what does it tell us about, well, how people believe things?
Exactly. It's more about understanding their thought process.
So they pull this Trump quote. Remember when he said that thing about Gaza? Something like, we're not buying, we're taking it, we're keeping it, and there will be peace.
Yeah, I remember that. Bold statement.
But then they link it to Zechariah chapter 9. They're suggesting Trump, maybe without knowing it, is like fulfilling a prophecy about, well, someone taking over Gaza. What do you think about that?
I mean, on the surface, Trump could have just been, playing politics or talking tough.
Right.
But this video, it takes his words and puts them through this, like, biblical prophecy filter. Makes you wonder, are they just forcing current events to fit a story that's already written? Or do they really see a pattern matching these ancient prophecies?
Yeah, like, are they looking for clues to confirm something they already believe?
Could be.
And it's not just Trump. They bring up Jared Kushner's idea about Gaza, too. Remember that? They keep talking about its value, like prime waterfront property.
Right. Like beachfront real estate.
Do you think this whole money angle is that common when people interpret these prophecies?
It definitely adds a different dimension.
Yeah.
Suddenly, it's not just a spiritual thing or some power struggle. It's about wealth. Who's going to control all these resources? Makes the whole prophecy seem a bit more real, more relatable.
So we've got Trump, we've got Kushner, all tied into this biblical prophecy narrative. And then they shift gears. They talk about all the destruction in Gaza. They say it lines up with what's written in Zephaniah 2 and Zechariah about Gaza being, like, deserted and ruined. They even quote the verses. Are they being selective, do you think? Focusing only on the destruction part?
Well, you have to remember, the Bible's a complicated book. You can interpret it in a lot of ways.
Right, lots of different readings.
They focus on these verses about ruin, about Gaza falling apart. It fits their story, sure. But are there other verses, maybe ones about rebuilding or hope, that they're ignoring? That's something to consider.
Yeah, it's like they're picking and choosing to fit their point.
Exactly.
And then, just when you think they've covered everything, they bring up the Nephilim. Remember those guys? Offspring of fallen angels, crazy stuff.
The Nephilim, yeah. Wow. They say these beings, they found a hideout in Gaza, specifically this tribe, the Anakim. They even use numbers 13.33 as proof. It's really something how they tie this ancient, almost mythical idea to what's happening today. What are they trying to say by doing that?
I mean, it definitely adds a layer of mystery. It's not just politicians and Bible verses anymore. It's like there are these unseen forces messing with Gaza, influencing everything. It adds a supernatural element to their story, right?
Yeah, it's a powerful way to get people's attention. By linking the current unrest in Gaza to these ancient giants, they're saying it's not just politics. It's this age-old battle between good and evil.
Like history is repeating itself.
Exactly.
They even suggest that even though the giants aren't physically around today, their, like, spiritual influence is still causing trouble. That's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? To say what people are doing today is because of these mythical creatures from the past.
It blurs the lines a bit. Are they saying the Nephilim, like, literally still exist somehow? Or are they using them as a symbol for bad stuff happening in the world? It's not entirely clear.
It's almost like they're saying this ancient story, it's still relevant to understanding Gaza today, even if it's a bit of a vague connection.
Right, and that vagueness lets them link these things together, ancient myths and modern conflicts, without needing actual proof. They're banking on people accepting this symbolic connection, seeing the Nephilim as a metaphor for the things they believe are shaping what's going on.
Okay, so we've gone from Trump and Kushner to destruction and now giants. It feels like we're jumping between different realities here. So how does all of this connect back to their main argument about biblical prophecy?
Remember, their goal is to present what's happening today as, like, proof of what the Bible predicted.
Right, like it's all playing out as planned.
Exactly. And by throwing in all these different things, politicians, Bible verses, ancient myths, they're building this complex story that seems to back up their interpretation. It's like they're presenting a case using whatever they can find to convince you this isn't just random, it's all part of God's plan.
So they're using these seemingly random things to make it seem like everything's destined to happen, like it's all pre-written.
Exactly. And that feeling of inevitability, it can be powerful, especially when things are uncertain and scary. It gives a sense of order, of meaning in a world that often feels chaotic.
I can see how that would be comforting. If you believe it's all part of a divine plan, maybe you don't worry as much about the future. Okay, so they've set the stage, connected current events to biblical prophecy, even thrown in those giants for good measure. What's next? Where do they go from here?
Well, they go on to link the possible fall of Gaza, right, to this idea of the Messianic age coming. They actually use Zechariah 9.13 to make that connection.
Okay, we've mentioned the Messianic age, but for those who aren't quite sure what that is, can you explain it a bit more? What does it actually mean in this context?
It's complicated. Different religions have different ideas about it.
Right, different takes on it.
This video, though, they're looking at it from a Jewish perspective, like a future time of peace and prosperity when the Messiah comes. It's often seen as, justice travailing, a kind of utopia on earth.
So they're saying all this stuff happening in Gaza, as crazy as it is, it's actually like building up to this ultimate era of peace.
That's exactly it. They're painting a picture where even bad things, even conflict, are part of a bigger positive plan. The fall of Gaza, it's not just some political event. It's like a key piece that leads to this amazing, almost perfect future.
Interesting way to look at it. They're saying even destruction has a purpose in this divine plan. Does the video get specific about how the fall of Gaza would lead to this Messianic age?
They mention things like hostages being freed, the nation becoming whole, and Ephraim, the Messiah's son, also becoming whole. And they see this as directly leading to the battle of Gog and Magog, which is a major prophetic event in both Jewish and Christian beliefs about the end times.
Gog and Magog. Yeah, I've heard those names before, but gotta admit, I'm a little fuzzy on who they are and what this battle's all about. Can you remind us?
Sure thing. Gog and Magog, they're mentioned in Ezekiel and Revelation in the Bible. They're usually depicted as like these super powerful enemies who create this massive army to attack Israel in the end times. This battle, it's seen as the ultimate fight between good and evil, the cosmic showdown before God establishes his kingdom on earth.
So the video is essentially saying the fall of Gaza is one of the triggers that sets this whole apocalyptic chain of events in motion. Like Gaza falls, then boom, final battle between good and evil.
That's the idea. They even bring in this quote from rabbis about the awakening of Zion as more proof. This awakening, they interpret it as the events leading up to the Messianic age, including that final battle with Gog and Magog.
It's amazing how they connect everything, biblical prophecy, current events, even what rabbis have said, to make their point. It's like they're building a case using every piece of evidence they can find. But could it be they're just choosing specific bits of information that fit their conclusion?
It's a good question. When you're talking about stuff like biblical prophecy, you always got to think about where the information is coming from and if there's any bias.
Right. Could be a slanted view.
Are they being fair and showing all sides? Or are they picking and choosing things that support what they already believe? Something anyone watching this video needs to think about.
Definitely. Because if you already have an answer in mind, it's easy to find proof for it, even if it's taken out of context or twisted to fit your story.
Okay, so we've got the fall of Gaza linked to the Messianic age and this epic battle of Gog and Magog. What else do they talk about? Any other examples of current events matching up with biblical prophecy?
Well, there's this one detail they bring up. You might find it interesting. It's about Jesus riding a donkey into Jerusalem, like in Zechariah 9.9.
Ah, right, the triumphal entry. But how do they connect that to what's going on in Gaza today? What's the link?
They focus on how some people see the donkey's fur pattern, get this, as a prefiguration of the cross. It's a visual thing that connects Jesus entering Jerusalem with his crucifixion later on.
Hold on, the donkey's fur pattern, I've never heard that before. What's so important about that connection? It's a way to tie those two events together, Jesus peacefully entering Jerusalem and then his suffering and death. By focusing on this visual detail, the video suggests that even little things, tiny details, can have a deeper meaning within this whole prophecy thing. It's like reinforcing this idea that everything's connected, even a donkey's fur. It's all part of God's plan.
Wow, they're saying God's working through everything, even the pattern on a donkey, to achieve his goals. That's a pretty big statement, isn't it? To say God's orchestrating every single detail of history.
It is, and it makes you think about things like free will. If everything's already decided, what control do we really have over our choices? Is it all just a script we're following?
Right. If it's all predetermined, what's the point of trying to change anything? It's a deep question, kind of a rabbit hole.
Yeah. It is. And it's one of the many interesting questions that come up when you start exploring biblical prophecy and what happens at the end of the world.
Okay, so they've connected the fall of Gaza to the Messianic age, the battle of Gog and Magog, and even brought in this thing about the donkey's fur representing Jesus' suffering. That's a lot to cover in one video. What's their main point? What are they trying to tell their audience? Feels like we've been all over the place with this deep dive. Politicians, ancient giants, biblical prophecies, even donkey fur patterns. It's wild how they tied it all together into one story.
Yeah, quite a mix of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think what they're really getting at, their main point, is this idea that what we're seeing in Gaza and everywhere else, it's not just random. It's all playing out according to biblical prophecy.
So they're basically saying everything that's happening, it's part of God's plan.
Exactly. And for people who believe that, it can be pretty comforting. It gives them a sense of order. Like there's a reason for everything, even when the world feels chaotic.
I get that. It's reassuring. If you believe it's all preordained, maybe you don't worry as much about what's coming next. But what about people who don't see things that way? What do they say about those who might be skeptical, who don't buy into their interpretation?
Well, they do say that not everyone's going to agree with them. In fact, they kind of seem to like the idea of being a minority, like a group with special knowledge that most people just don't get.
Like, we know the truth, even if you don't. It's a powerful way to get people on your side. That sense of exclusivity.
Right. They even say that people living in Israel are like completely prepared and believe these prophecies are about to come true. It's like they're drawing a line, separating those who believe from those who don't.
Creating this us versus them narrative. They're the chosen few, the ones who understand what's really going on, like those prophets in the Bible who warned everyone about doom while everyone else just ignored them.
It's a story that resonates with a lot of people. We all want to feel like our lives have meaning, like there's a bigger purpose to it all. And in a world that often feels random and scary, the idea that there's a divine plan can be very attractive.
It reminds us that we all see the world differently, based on what we believe, our experiences, our culture.
Absolutely. Whether we agree with their interpretation of what's happening in Gaza or not, it's important to remember that it comes from a real belief system that many people share.
Right. And this deep dive, it wasn't about saying whether they're right or wrong. It was about understanding how their beliefs influence the way they see the world, how they interpret these events. It shows that even when we're looking at the same things, our own personal biases, our perspectives, shape how we understand them.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
And recognizing that, it's essential for being able to connect with people who see things differently, for building empathy and understanding.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into biblical prophecy and current events, what's the one thing you'd want our listener to think about?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. The world's a complicated place. There are lots of different ways to see things, and we should always be a little bit skeptical, question the stories we're told, and consider other points of view.
It's a good reminder that the search for understanding, it's a journey, and there are always going to be new things to learn and new perspectives to consider. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next time to explore more connections between information, belief systems, and how we make sense of the world.